Hello everyone and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan, a TV program that provides opportunities for local authors to share their journey to getting published and on their way to becoming bestsellers. Now we all have a different definition to what happiness means to us, individually speaking. And this is one of the many reasons why we created the show. Now if you're an aspiring author or not, this program is yours to enjoy. Now with us today in the studio, we have Bob Paff, the author of Communicating to Win. Now, Bob has been featured on the nationally syndicated Steve Harvey Show, as well as has his own Communicating to Win and Competitive Edge, a segment on Fox 45, Good Day Baltimore, including appearances on other Hmong media engagement, which opened the door for his acting and voiceover career. Now, Bob, it is an honor to have you on our show today.
Oh, it's an honor to be here, Dan. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Now, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Wow. Well, I'm a Baltimore guy, a simple guy. I'm the father of 6 children. Imagine that. Business background, sales, marketing, a little bit of media, and then this book came out in 2015. So this has opened up a career as a motivational speaker. You mentioned some acting. I do some modeling and some voiceover work as well.
Perfect. Now, this book, Communicating to Win, what really motivated you to write it?
This book is a transparent look at my life, and so what motivated me to write it were really the failures in my life. And I think back to, you mentioned Steve Harvey. When I was on Steve's show a couple of years ago, he asked me what the 3 most important things in my life were, and I said, my family, my faith, and my failures.
Okay.
And he focused in on the failures. And this book is really what happens to us, in this case me, when we fail to communicate. See, nobody really teaches us, Dan, how to communicate.
Correct.
If we're lucky, our parents taught us social skills, right? But nobody really teaches us how to communicate. And so this book is what happens when we don't communicate. So again, it's a transparent look at my life.
So would you call this an autobiography?
You know, it's a great way to put it. Nobody's called it an autobiography, but there's certainly, the names have been changed to protect the innocent, shall we say. But, you know, they're real stories. And so I write like I speak. And so I want people to really sit down and pick this book up and think they're having a conversation with me. So in a lot of ways, it is very much autobiographical, absolutely.
Do you apply your knowledge when you do your guest speaking, your like motivational speaking to other companies or corporate or even private? How do you apply what you've written to their issues?
It's a great question. I mean, I think one of the things that, well, first of all, the most important person we communicate with is ourselves.
Agreed.
And we don't think about that. You know, so we're programmed. Think about a young child. I mean, when children are hungry, what do? When they cry, they need to be changed, they cry. And then as life goes on and things filter our brains, we learn how to lie and all the, right? All these issues sort of break that down. What this is about is being true to yourself. I mean, this is I'm a practicing Catholic, I'm happy to say it, and one of my priests called it a faith-based message. I mean, I think it really is, Dan, it's very simple. The message is very simple, and it's really about being true to yourself, communicating with yourself. So yes, I do apply it when I do talks, when I go in, I find out, you know, what's bothering you as a company, as an individual. If I do coaching, we want to get to the root of where the problems exist.
So this basically, how do you apply this in more of a personal level versus corporate? Let's say when you go and coach people who are having communicating problem with their significant other, how can you apply this book to them?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do, and let's look at relationships.
Yes.
Let's talk about relationships. 50% of first marriages end in divorce, 65% of seconds, and 73% of thirds. That might surprise you.
That's scary.
You know, so it gets worse, it doesn't get better. And so again, I think you have to identify, one of the things I always say to people is, how does something make you feel? Because that's our true compass, right? How something makes us feel. So we need to start from that and then analyze that, because so much of the way we act and the way we react is programmed into us from the time we were, I mean, Freud says by the time we're 5 years old, we're formed pretty much.
Yes.
And
Memory
so,
starts it.
right. And so a lot of these things are Dan, they're people pushing our buttons. So whether it's your boss or your spouse, somebody on a daily basis is pushing your button. And so what I try to get folks to do is to realize that. And you know, the other thing too is we have people in our lives on a daily basis that maybe shouldn't be in our lives, that we don't want in our lives. And so the other thing I teach people is how to manage those toxic people, we've called them. So it's really, really about being true to yourself.
You've mentioned a very good point, which is communicating with yourself first.
Yes.
But when you're in a relationship or when you're dealing with your coworkers,
Yeah.
there's one thing that you cannot change is them. So how do you cope knowing that they're negative, and as you know, a negative environment will have direct repercussion on you? How do you manage this?
One of the things I talk about in the book, and I wrote it, and then I found out later that Gandhi said it. So I was happy to find out he said it after I wrote it. We live so much of our lives in fear. Think about this: fear of rejection, fear of embarrassment, fear of confrontation. And so in a relationship, if I tell you how I feel or what I want or what I need, in the back of my mind, those little voices are saying, oh no, she's going to reject you, she's going to embarrass you, it's going to create conflict and confrontation, so I'm not going to go there. What we need to do in relationships is to own our feelings, own our needs, our wants, our desires, and stop making the other person wrong. You and I chatted about this a little bit earlier, is you need to get in touch with how things make you feel as an individual. And I'm going to use this term. When I come at you, it's got to be a warm start, okay? So I have to come to you and say, Dan, what I really need in this relationship, and what I really need is, when you come home at the end of the day, instead of grabbing the mail, I'd like a hug. Let's go back to the 5 love languages.
Yes.
I mean, that's a classic book, and I think in addition to mine, I'm going to put a plug in for it. People should all read the 5 love languages.
Yes.
But unless we're operating on that same wavelength, we don't know. But I can't say, oh, Dan, every day you come home, you grab the mail. You see? What does that do? That puts you on the defensive. So what I need to say is, I miss you all day long. Honey, can I have a hug when you come in the door? That would make me feel so good. Now, it boosted you, and it boosted me. You see the difference between the two? And so that's why I tell people, own your feelings. It's okay to have wants and needs. We all do, but we keep things buried out of fear. We spend so much time living in fear. We really do.
Now, do you feel that based on what you mentioned, those 5 love languages, when you understand what the significant other love language, the main one, the dominant one, do you have to really adapt to it and really kind of like put your own happiness aside to make sure that they're happy? How is that going to create a miscommunication or a barrier between both of you?
Yeah, I love that, and I think the answer to that is you have to find the happy medium, because what you bring up, suppose physical touch is mine and acts of service is yours, and you need me to do something for you, and I'm not comfortable doing that, or I don't really want to do that. We need to have a dialogue around that, because, for example, suppose you say to me, I need you to do this seven times. And I say, 7 times? There's no way. I just can't do it. I don't want to do it 1. You want me to do it 7. And so we arrive at 3. And so think about this. I need to be comfortable doing that because it's what you want. I mean, I really do believe in relationships, since that's what we're focusing on right now, is my goal should be for you to be happy. If I can make you happy and you can make me happy, isn't that a win-win?
Absolutely.
And that's really ultimately what it's about. So we need to compromise. Everybody, whether it's professional or personal, you need to have those compromises. But the important thing is we need to have the dialogue. So if you need 7 and I can give you 3, can you live with 3?
Absolutely.
Or do you come back to me and say, I need 5, Bob, can you give me 5?
It's all about negotiation, right?
It's it absolutely is a negotiation. And I've heard people say we run our marriage or our relationship like a business. There are business aspects to managing these things, and it's okay. You've got to keep the dialogue and the conversation going, and that's really what this whole thing is about.
Beautiful. Now let's go back to the book.
Yep.
Tell me more about how was your journey to writing it? I mean, I know since this is somewhat of an if you cannot call it autobiography, so it must have been very easy for you to write it because it's something that you experienced yourself. So tell me more about this journey. I mean, the writer's block and so on and so forth. How did you experience that?
Yeah, well, I decided a couple of years ago that I wanted to write a book because it was a message that I needed to get out. And also as a motivational speaker, I customize a lot of my talks. And so I had been talking to a friend and said, I want to write a book. I want to write a book based on my experiences. Excuse me. And so my friend said, your book is in your talks. It's all right there. And so for me, because as I mentioned to you, I write as I speak, it was really sitting down. Once the chapters are outlined, there are 16 chapters in the book, then you kind of go and fill in the blanks. But it's almost like I would suggest to your viewers that it's like having a conversation with yourself. We all have different styles of writing, Mine's very conversational. And even when and maybe we'll get into this if there's time, even when we get into the editing process, some editors are going to say, oh, you should do it this way or say it that way. The thing about this book that I wanted to maintain was the integrity, my integrity, because it's written in my style. And so it's like you and I just having this conversation. So really, I guess what I did here is it was about having a conversation with myself.
I see.
Yeah.
And was your editor able to kind of keep the tone or keep this kind of like right as you speak?
Well, it was challenging. It was challenging because, and you mentioned writer's block before, I tend to write when the motivation or the inspiration affects me, when it hits me, when it strikes me. And no matter what time of the day that is, a lot of writers keep a notepad by their bed. And yes, I've sprung up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and jotted something down, or written it on a cocktail napkin, whenever. And so what I tell people also to do is, I can't, Dan, sit down and force myself to write, because me and the style that I write and the topic, communication, I need to have that communication with myself flowing. So I really can't sit down and say, what do I want to say here or there? So we're all different. A lot of people sit down and 8 hours a day, they just sit down there and get a page out or whatever they're doing. For me, it's a continuation of that conversation with myself.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Now, how do you draw this inspiration when it comes to sitting all day writing a specific chapter on the book? And how do you go from there? Like, how do you go to the next chapter and the third one and the fourth? Do you kind of like say to yourself, in one day I'm going to do 10 pages, I'm not going to leave my chair until this is completed?
I've never done that. I mean, the chapters build on one another, so it's got to be a continual thought, but I never, like some days I might have one page.
Okay.
And I'm okay, and cut yourself some slack, to use that term. I've got to be okay with walking away with one really good page that reflects the message that I'm trying to give, and then going back to it and spending time with it. And that's been an interesting process too, because as I did the book, we would go back and the editors, and you mentioned that, and so we had to really sort of keep them focused on, no, this is what I mean, and don't change that word. But you're constantly reading and rereading this stuff as well, and so it's sinking in, and you want to make sure that you're maintaining, I used this word earlier, that authenticity, that these really are my words.
Perfect. Well, when we come back from a quick break, we will continue our conversation with Bob and address his many challenges as an author, getting his book to print, and his marketing plan to promoting his book on Amazon and other available retailers across the country. Stay tuned. Message from the universe. When negative thoughts attract unpleasant outcome. Shh! Not that you ever would, but when someone tells their best friend about their difficult day, or how tricky relationships have been, or that they have a jolly good life in most regard except financially, not only do they relive the unpleasantness, but they commission all the elements to project their future, whatever they've been claiming. Besides, you never say jolly. Better to whisper sweet nothing. Many tend to share everything about their lives on social media, the good, the bad, and the worst. For all your successes, you tend to share it on Facebook to get positive feedback and congratulations. What you're not aware of is that people congratulate you but actually feel a tremendous amount of jealousy, which in return starts sending negative frequency your way. And the result is a failed venture. Doesn't happen all of the time, but on the embryo stage of your venture, keep it to yourself. No need to share anything with anyone. Stop looking for others' approval to move on with your life. Eliminate the them esteem and focus on yourself. Get the positive feedback from within you and not from the outside world who couldn't care less if you fail and bring you more negativity if you succeed. Many naysayers will always come to you and try discouraging you with your project because they are afraid of potential because they have none. They are afraid of you climbing the ladder of success because they can't do it on their own. People fear others when they're succeeding and wishes for the worst to happen. The lesson is to not share anything with anyone until your face is plastered on the Fortune 500 magazine. At this point, you wouldn't need to share anything because everyone will already know who you are. Now, to learn more about the universe, be sure to catch my show, The Happiness Journey, right here on MCM. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm here talking with Bob Paff, the author of Communicating to Win. Now, we will now discuss about the hurdles of promoting his book to retailers and getting reviews from bloggers to properly get his book in the hand of potential customers. A very big challenge for most authors out there. So, Bob, tell me more about those challenges. The marketing side of it.
Yeah, no, I think the marketing piece, fortunately for me, I've got a background in sales and marketing and business, and so I'm going to throw out a couple words here. First of all, you've got to be passionate about what you're doing, about what the product is, and as you know, I mean, everybody is their own product. This book is a product. And I also tell people that everyone's in sales. We're selling all day long, Dan, and unfortunately, sales gets a bum rap. You hear the word sell or sale, and immediately people recoil. You got to get behind this thing. And I will tell you, the average book, and you probably know this, sells 230 copies or so. Mm-hmm. We sold over 5,000 copies in the first year.
Wow.
All organically, all through social media.
Okay.
And then got it into bookstores and other things. And so two things I would say to your viewers is, don't be embarrassed to pitch it. Don't be embarrassed to say, this is a really good read, this can help you, put it out there, and ask people to help you, ask people to promote it. But you really do have to get behind the sales process. There's a great book that I'm sure you're familiar with called The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's a classic book in the self-help genre. That book, will surprise a lot of people, did not become a bestseller until it was out for 5 years. And how did it become a bestseller? It became a bestseller when Scott Peck started going around and doing book signing events and started, and started promoting it and started getting behind the book. What you can't do is you can't write my book, your book, Ultimate Happiness. I love them side by side right here. You can't write these books and then expect them to take a life on their own. You've got to breathe that life into it. And it's a challenging and difficult process, even for a guy like me who does have a sales and marketing background and who believes in it. So there are a lot of things that are going on as you're going through this, but sales, marketing, promotions, I mean, you've got to be out there, Dan, every second promoting the book, promoting your work.
Now, most authors feel that, especially first-time authors,
yes,
they think that, okay, well, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to become a millionaire.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the next Stephen King.
Exactly.
Right? And what would you suggest to them?
I'm still waiting for that train to come in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you say that, okay, you have to write because you're passionate about and do not expect much coming from the sales of it? Or how would you like motivate them?
Well, you've heard the expression, do what you love and never work a day in your life. Mm-hmm. And so what I would say to those people, and I have another thought that I want to bring up about most writers to sort of generalize that. Yeah, I think you need to do it because you're passionate about it, and not because you think, because realistically, I mean, J.K. Rowling, who did the Harry Potter thing,
yes,
you probably know the history there. I mean,
absolutely.
At one point, I think she was either on welfare or homeless, and she was rejected by, I think, 100 publishers.
Yes.
So everybody told her she was
I read
crazy.
Her story. Mm-hmm.
And of course, people told Walt Disney that he was crazy, and we've got other examples like that in history. You cannot give up. You cannot give up, but you have to write and speak about what you're passionate about. For a lot of writers, I would say, they don't have necessarily those sales and those marketing and those business skills. Mm-hmm. And I've talked to a lot of people who said, that's my stumbling block. That's my Achilles heel, is being able to get behind this thing and being able to promote it. That really, for a lot of people, if you walk in Barnes & Noble, you think that everybody's written a book.
Yes.
But if I asked you how many people that you know have written a book, I mean, you and I are different because we've written books, and so we might know other
yes,
people. But if you ask the average person, how many people have written a book? Most people don't know anybody's written a book, right?
That's true.
It's very, very difficult. So I would say, and people ask me all the time, and you probably get it, hey, I've been told I could write a book. I've been told there's a book in me. I think there's probably a book in everybody.
Yes,
I would say that. And for me, book, story are equivalent. I mean, everybody's certainly got a story, mm-hmm, and you have to say to yourself, is this something that people would pick it up and read? Would they recommend it? I wrote this to help people. And so as I mentioned to you before, this being a faith-based message, it doesn't matter what that faith is, mm-hmm, but I wrote this book to say, listen, I made all these mistakes. I'd like to help you avoid some of those mistakes. So if you can read this, Dan, what I've done's already happened. I can't take it
yes,
back. I can't, right? And I can cry over the spilt milk or whatever the saying is. I can't do that. But I can help people going forward. And so, folks, if you've got a message and you want to share it with people and you think you've got something that helps other people, then find what that is. And I would say the word came to my head, talk about it, as opposed to writing it. And I'm using the two interchangeably. But that's really what you're doing, is you're talking to that piece of paper as you start to put this book together and tell your story.
But this is, as you mentioned, you talk as you write, or you write as you talk.
Yeah.
This is actually a very unique way to be able to write books, especially nonfiction.
Yes.
Because this is your own experience. But those who want to write fiction, would you put this in a total different category because they have to be more creative? It's not a fact that they could go on Google and find out about it. Communicating is a very, very common issue among 7.1 billion people on this
Absolutely.
planet. And not understanding the other person is because you're not listening.
Right.
So tell us more about this listening skill that you need to have proper communication.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is from George Bernard Shaw, who said the problem with communication is the misconception that it's even taken place.
Okay.
And so listening and communicating, and Shaw said that in like the mid-1800s, and the problem still exists today,
Yes,
right?
I agree.
And so the other cool thing about it is that I tell people it crosses all racial, socioeconomic, political, and religious boundaries. I've yet to meet anyone, and if you know who they are, please give them my cell phone number. I've yet to meet anyone who says, I don't want to be a better communicator. I don't want to be I don't want to be a more effective communicator. I don't want a happier marriage. I don't want to be happier in the workforce. And so that's the other thing that I like about it, and it's cool that it's universally applicable. Now, you said a word that sort of struck me, and that was creative. And so I don't think I could write fiction. I really don't.
I don't either.
I take my hat off to those people that do it. It's the same thing when I did I did an acting role, and I used to think, why am I doing this? It's silly. It's tough. It really, I'm here to tell you that I play a congressman in House of Cards, and I thought, wow, it's not as easy as it looks to do that. I don't think I could write fiction because, I think you've got to develop the characters, right?
Yes,
you've
definitely.
got to, this whole thing that goes on there, I don't think my mind works that way. I like to think of myself, and those folks are as well, as storytellers. And that's the way I look at it. But again, I've always immersed myself into more business books, more self-help books. I think it really comes down to how we're wired, and what the goal is. I also believe that I've got a God-given reason for doing this.
Well, you have a mission in this planet.
Correct.
Is to be able to help people, and this is why
That's
you've
exactly
been gifted.
right.
You've been given this
Or
gift.
I would have written Harry Potter.
Right?
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And you'll be driven here with a Lamborghini, right?
That's exactly right. You
Exactly.
See, so that's not my calling in life. And that's a great point you bring up, because I would encourage people to find out what your purpose in life is, the purposeful driven life, or whatever. I'd like to leave the world and my 6 children better off than I found them. And I think we should all be willing to make that contribution. I tell people, pay it forward and always give more than you take. And so that's really, and this book's changing lives. So I'm very, very pleased with the fact that it's gone from Thailand to Scotland.
Wow. Is it translated in other languages?
It is. We're in the process of translating it into Spanish. We're almost done, and you'll be very happy to hear this in French.
In French. Nice.
In French. That's
very
exactly
excited.
right.
Very excited.
And I've done it. I recorded it on Audible, so a lot
Okay.
of folks put it right on their phone. They can listen to it while they're driving, and it's on Kindle as well. So as it gets out there further, we're adapting to that. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Now, I want to thank Bob Paff for sharing with us what his journey was all about towards getting published and the many hurdles he faced throughout his exciting life. Now, if you'd like to purchase the book, you can go to his website or on Amazon. Just type his name, Bob Paff, with 2 F. Also, his website is listed below, www.bobpaff.com. Now, and to conclude with my quick inspirational message, let's pretend, just for today, all day long, throughout our every thought and decision, that life is easy, that everyone means well, and that time is on our side, okay? Now let's pretend that we are loved beyond belief, that magic conspires on our behalf, and that can ever hurt us without our consent, all right? Now if we like this game, we'll play tomorrow as well, and the next day, and the day after that, and pretty soon it won't be a game at all, because life, for us, will become those things, just as it becomes what it is today. You're getting warmer. Now, we hope that you've enjoyed the show, and we're all looking forward to have you back watching our next episode. My name is Dr. Dan Amzalag, and you can also view our past episode on our YouTube channel. Type in ProAce International, and you could view the happiness journey. Thank you.